Hi, this is Sam Blackwell. I am a program officer here at United Way, and I oversee our household stability work, particularly the housing portion of that. So this is just a brief overview of the housing stability area, specifically around the portfolio of housing. There will be a separate portfolio or recording for the portfolio of food security. So if you are looking for that, feel free to check the website. So just for a brief overview, housing stability is broken into two portfolios. One of them is housing and the other one is food security. In housing, we will be focusing on investments that are working with people who are experiencing homelessness through supportive housing and through work to reduce barriers for people who would not likely be placed in supportive housing. Our food security work is really focused on food shelves and meal programs and around the intersection there of health and nutrition services, access-related services, and connections to social service or income supports within the programs. Again, this one is just about housing, so if you are interested in the food security work, please check our website for that recording. So broad overview of what we're looking for in housing. We have one outcome for all of these three different sort of pathways, right? So what we want to see is that people who are experiencing homelessness access safe, stable, and affordable housing. And we think that doing that can be done through three different tracks. There are probably other tracks out there, of course, but this is what United Way is going to be focusing on. So first track is for those folks who are experiencing the most barriers to accessing that housing. You can see that as the bottom arrow, and that's permanent supportive housing. So for the sake of this RFP, we will consider permanent supportive housing and the services that happen there as that outcome of people experiencing homelessness access safe, stable, and affordable housing. We are then also looking at shorter term supportive housing. So supportive housing that may be less than 2 years would be considered supportive housing in this instance. So in that, we will be measuring safe exits from those programs into safe, stable, and affordable housing. So that's how we know that we got out that income of people experiencing homelessness, access safe, stable, and affordable housing. So we'll be funding permanent supportive housing programs as well as supportive housing, whether that's transitional or rapid rehousing or even something that might look different than both of those. And then our last area is this reduced barriers to housing. So we know that there are folks who are experiencing homelessness whose barriers are low enough that they're unlikely to get placed into supportive housing. So we are using the VI-SPDAT to measure that. So folks who are scoring 4 or less on the VI-SPDAT would be sort of those folks that are not likely to get placed into housing. And so we want to focus on them. We are encouraging programs to use the VI-SPDAT to identify those folks, but we also know that not everyone is using the VI-SPDAT and that it is sort of a prohibitively long tool. So if you are able to come up with a compelling substitute for that, please feel free to outline that in the application. But for the reduced barriers to housing, we'll be measuring folks who are able to have that barrier or provided services to reduce a barrier, and that those barriers are then mitigated. Just so everyone knows, eligible programs must be serving those that meet the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency's definition of homelessness, and that is actually a requirement of the program. So these are the outcomes and indicators. If you have questions about which ones you should be filling out, please refer to the previous slide, so this diagram. This is also available in the RFP itself, so you can look at that. And you'll see that folks who are doing the barrier mitigation will answer indicators 1.1 and 1.2, so people who with low barriers that are provided services, as well as youth who exit shelter into safe, stable, and affordable housing. For folks who are doing supportive housing, but not permanent supportive housing, you will see that you will answer 1.3, which is about how many people you are serving in that supportive housing, and then how many people are able to make progress on a goal. And then for permanent supportive housing, you will do 1.4 and 1.5. 1.4 is just how many people you have served, and 1.5 is how many people have made progress on a goal. In the future, we will ask additional indicators about these, specifically for the supportive housing piece of that. We will be asking about exits in the safe, stable, and affordable housing. So that information will need to happen. And we will work with you to identify if there are other indicators that we will be asking about in future years. But for the sake of this RFP and for the first year of reporting, these will be the indicators that will be most important. And so we do have some eligibility requirements and some preferred approaches in this area. Again, you need to be serving folks who are experiencing homelessness as defined by the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. That definition is in the RFP, so you can look that up. But we chose MHFA's definition over HUD's definition because it does create space for folks who are doubled up, who are couch hopping, and for folks who may have housing right now but are imminently facing homelessness. Organizations providing drop-in shelter beds are not eligible, so if you are a shelter that provides longer-term lengths of stay, that's fine. But if you are only providing one night of shelter or you are a pay-for-stay shelter, you will not be eligible in this application. Youth outreach as a standalone service is not eligible, so you'll see there is no indicator for just youth outreach. Instead, it will have to be tied to the result of placing youth in safe, stable, and affordable housing. And then housing developers or property managers are not eligible unless they, as an organization, provide housing services. And so if you are a housing developer or property manager and you also provide supportive services within that housing, you would be eligible. But if you are a housing developer that contracts with another organization to provide supportive services, you would not be eligible. However, the organization that's providing the services would be. We also have some preferred approaches. So we encourage applicants to participate in coordinated systems of access where available and appropriate. However, we do know that coordinated entry doesn't work for all populations. And so we want to make sure that there is a place for not participating in that. So if you choose not to participate in coordinated systems of access, please indicate why you do that in the application. We are focusing on organizations that are serving higher percentages of people who are most impacted by racial ethnic disparities. So we will be looking at percentages of people of color and American Indians, as well as organizations serving higher percentages of people with challenging barriers to housing, namely those with eviction records, criminal histories, very low incomes, or significant mental health issues. And so we will ask you to sort of outline what percentages of those folks you are serving in the application. Organizations that partner with other organizations and systems, particularly around legal aid, mental health, and education and jobs, are important. That's really getting at that holistic support. So if those are offered in-house, great, but if they are not, we will be looking for organizations that partner to provide those resources. And then we also ask that organizations incorporate best practices for supporting people experiencing homelessness. So the two that we have outlined specifically are Housing First and the 9 principles for working with youth. Those are the two that we really highlighted. And so we do hope that applicants will talk specifically about those two. If you are not using Housing First because you are contracting with a property manager that doesn't let you use Housing First, please feel free to include that explanation in there. And if you are using other best practices like critical time intervention or DBT or motivational interviewing, please also feel free to outline what those are and why you use those as well. And then where appropriate, use a 2-generational model to support children, youth, and parents. So for people who are serving families or who are serving youth who are parents, we will be giving special priority to those who are using services to support both the children and the parents in their programming. And then we are asking that folks use a trauma-informed approach in providing services. So all of those things we would love for you to be able to touch on within the application itself, because those are some of the things that we are going to be looking most for. So that wraps up the housing portion of this. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the RFP at gccuw.org website or give the phone number a call. And feel free to check out the other recordings that are available for the different portfolio areas. Thank you.